All right, welcome to the last topic. In this topic, we're really going to take everything we've learned in the section on macroeconomics and put it all together to help us understand how economies grow, or how do we conceptualize long-run growth. And we're going to spend even more time talking about short-run fluctuations in the economy, why we think they might happen, and how the government can approach managing short-term economic fluctuations. I also just realized I've been recording in SD, so sorry. All right, we're gonna start out here talking about long-run economic growth. So if we were in an upper level course, we would define a production function for our economy and then think about how growth happened within that economy. But here we're gonna just talk a little bit about what those production functions would look like without getting into the math. So here you can see I have a function, output is equal to some function of my inputs. Remember, we've been talking about inputs here as labor, capital, natural capital, and human capital. All right. Some people would call that entrepreneurship and the environment, but these are just different terms that mean the same thing. So we've got our kind of categories of inputs that go into our production function. And then we also have this term A, which is very important because A represents how we transform our inputs into output, which means technology that we use in the production process, efficiency within the economy, and productivity, right? So every time we talk about deadweight loss, we're talking about inefficiencies or loss in our productive capacity in terms of our total output, right? So that's supposed to be, sorry, productivity of inputs. These kind of factors all go into that A term in our production function. So what do we know about production here? We know that our production function should look something like this. As we increase our inputs, like say labor, if we add more labor to the economy, output should increase. Output should increase. But we also notice that it's increasing at a decreasing rate, right? Like the more inputs I add, the less output increases. So what this tells me is that the growth rates of output will increase as we accumulate inputs, right? As we grow our productive capacity, but the growth rate will tend to decrease as the country grows. All right, now we could get a lot more technical with all of this. We're not going to do that, okay? But this is all I want you to know, right? More inputs. What leads to long-run growth? More inputs, or better technology, more efficiency, or better productivity of those inputs. And as a country grows, we would tend to see a decrease in the growth rate, okay? So the US, for example, has a lower growth rate than China because the US has much higher GDP per capita than China, and so we see a lower growth rate. All right. Now, measuring economic growth in terms of just GDP falls short of what we're really interested in, because in macroeconomics, what we're really interested in is the quality of life for people, right? We're interested in what is the standard of living like. We only care about the economy because the economy helps us to have a better quality of life. But there are things, excuse me, that GDP does not measure that we care about, right? There's lots of things besides just total production that affect our quality of life. So I want to just talk a little bit about what other factors we care about. And if you're interested in long-run economic growth, how do countries grow? How could we help low-income countries to have better quality of life? Then there's a course that Dr. Jane teaches called Development Economics that would spend a whole semester discussing those issues. And I think we just added a lower division elective in that as well. So if you're interested, you can check that out. Right, so what else do we care about? Just think about your life, right? Think about what you care about in life. You imagine, you know, things that would lead to a happy life for you, right? You're gonna care not just about total product or total income, right? But besides income, we're gonna care about health and education. And these are often two important focuses of development initiatives, because health and education, one, they make our quality of life increase, but two, they make us more productive, right? Human capital, right, is right here in our production function. As people get more education and they are healthier, they're going to be more productive. And so improving health and education of a population helps us have a better quality of life through those two ways. We care also about employment. We've got, you know, some countries with that are natural resource rich, they can have high GDP simply by extracting resources and exporting them. But we know that people are happier being productive members of society. So when we have high unemployment rates, we're going to see people that are quite unhappy, even if GDP or average incomes are high. We care, of course, about inequality within our society, which is not reflected in our GDP numbers. We have other measures of inequality that we won't get into in this class. We care about the environment. Speaking of those extractive economies, right? GDP captures only what is being sold, right? Not what you're giving up to sell it. So say Indonesia deforests a large portion of their rainforest to export lumber. GDP numbers are going to be high, even though the country is losing some of their natural resources. All right, and then the last thing that I want to mention here is freedom. Okay, we care about freedom of speech, right? Freedom of information. There's lots of different freedoms that contribute to our own individual quality of life. And in fact, one kind of school of thought within development economics is that economic development, that the primary focus of that should be in increasing freedoms, and that when we aim to increase production or income, what we're really doing is trying to increase people's economic freedom, right? When you have more income, you can make choices in your life, right? You can choose to go to school, you could choose to go to college, you could choose what kind of job you get, you can choose when to retire if you have a high enough income, right? So this is obviously not my idea. The development as freedom is kind of an idea that was pioneered by a guy named Amartya Sen, who won the Nobel Prize for that for his work in development. Okay. All right, good. So now we're gonna talk a little bit more about long-run economic growth and its determinants in the model that we're developing for this section, the model of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. But I'm actually gonna wrap this section up with a video here that describes the history of economic growth over the last 200 years. And I will admit this video is about 10 years old, so know that going in, but it's a really wonderful video that gives you some sense of history, because I find that people in general have really no idea about how far we've come in the last 200 years. All right, so go watch that video and then we'll come back together to talk about short-run economic fluctuations.